The dusty afternoon sun beat down on Clifton Hill, Missouri, as Adelaide Thompson stepped off the stagecoach in August of 1878, wearing a black dress 2 sizes too large and a veil that concealed more than just her face. She carried everything she owned in a single worn carpetbag, and her fingers trembled as she adjusted the dark fabric covering her auburn hair, knowing that one slip of her carefully constructed lie could mean the difference between survival and ruin. The town spread before her in shades of brown and gray, wooden buildings lining a wide main street that churned into clouds of dirt whenever horses passed. Adelaide had rehearsed her story 1,000 times during the long journey from St. Louis, where she had fled after her father's gambling debts had attracted men with cold eyes and cruel intentions. A widow was respectable, pitied, left alone. An unmarried woman of 22 with no family was vulnerable prey. She made her way to the boarding house, a 2-story structure painted white though the color had long since faded to a tired cream. The proprietress, Mrs. Harriet Walsh, greeted her at the door with sympathetic eyes that took in the morning attire. "You poor dear, Mrs." Walsh said, ushering Adelaide inside. Come in, you must be exhausted from your travels." "Thank you," Adelaide replied softly, keeping her voice steady despite the guilt twisting in her chest. "I am Adelaide Thompson. I wrote ahead about a room." "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. I have a lovely room ready for you on the 2nd floor. It overlooks the street, nice and quiet." Mrs. Walsh paused, wringing her hands. "I am so sorry for your loss. Was it recent?" Adelaide had prepared for this question. 6 months ago, fever took him." The lie tasted bitter, but she forced it out. "I have been staying with my cousin in St. Louis, but I needed a fresh start somewhere new." Mrs. Walsh nodded with understanding, leading Adelaide up a narrow staircase. The room was small but clean, with a simple bed, a washstand, and a window that did indeed overlook the main street. Adelaide set down her bag and removed her veil, catching her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Her green eyes stared back, shadowed with exhaustion and worry. That evening, Adelaide ventured downstairs for supper, where Mrs. Walsh introduced her to the other boarders. There were 3: an elderly banker named Mr. Pemberton, a school teacher named Miss Olivia Crane, and a traveling salesman named Harold Finch who was only passing through. They all offered their condolences, and Adelaide accepted them with appropriate solemnity, feeling like a fraud with every word of sympathy. The next morning, Adelaide set out to find work. She had some money saved from selling her mother's jewelry, but it would not last forever. The general store did not need help. The hotel had no positions available. By midday, she found herself at the edge of town, standing before a modest ranch house with a hand-painted sign that read, "Fletcher Ranch." A woman in her 50s answered Adelaide's knock, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. She had kind eyes set in a weathered face, and her gray, streaked brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun. "Can I help you?" the woman asked. "My name is Adelaide Thompson. I am looking for work, and I heard in town that you might need help with cooking or household tasks." The woman studied her for a moment. "I am Martha Fletcher. My husband runs cattle, and we do have a large household. Our youngest daughter just married and moved to Kansas City, and I confess I have been overwhelmed with all the work." Her gaze fell on Adelaide's black dress. "You are in mourning." "Yes, madam. My husband passed 6 months ago. I need to support myself now." Martha's expression softened. "Come in, dear. Let us talk over some coffee." The Fletcher home was warm and welcoming, filled with the scent of fresh bread and the quiet comfort of a well-loved space. Martha led Adelaide to a large kitchen where she poured 2 cups of coffee and offered a slice of apple cake. As they talked, Adelaide learned that the Fletcher family consisted of Martha, her husband Robert, and their 2 sons who still lived at home and worked the ranch. "The work would be helping me with cooking, cleaning, laundry, and mending," Martha explained. "The men are in and out all day, and feeding them alone is a full-time job. I can offer you $20 a month, plus meals when you are working." $20 was more than Adelaide had hoped for. "That would be wonderful, Mrs. Fletcher. Thank you. Can you start tomorrow?" "Yes, madam." As Adelaide walked back to town, relief flooded through her. She had a room, she had work, and her disguise as a widow seemed to be holding. Perhaps she really could build a new life here, even if it was founded on a lie. The following days fell into a rhythm. Adelaide rose early and walked to the Fletcher ranch, where she and Martha worked side by side preparing enormous breakfasts, packing lunches, and cooking dinners that could feed a small army. The Fletcher men were polite but distant, treating Adelaide with the careful respect afforded to a woman in mourning. Robert Fletcher was a barrel-chested man with a booming laugh who clearly adored his wife. Their son Daniel was 19 and painfully shy, barely able to meet Adelaide's eyes when he thanked her for meals. It was the other son who unsettled her. Jackson Rivers was not actually a Fletcher by blood. Martha explained that he was the son of Robert's late brother, orphaned at 15 and taken in by the Fletchers 13 years ago. At 28, he was the ranch foreman, responsible for managing the cattle and the handful of hired hands. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, and he watched Adelaide with an intensity that made her deeply uncomfortable, not because he was threatening. Because he was curious. "Mrs. Thompson," he said one morning in early September, catching her as she carried water to the kitchen. "Let me get that for you." "I can manage, thank you," Adelaide replied, keeping her tone polite but distant. He took the bucket anyway, his work-roughened hands brushing hers for just a moment. "It is no trouble. That well is deep and the bucket is heavy." Adelaide followed him into the kitchen, acutely aware of his presence. He set the bucket down and turned to face her, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. "Have you been settling in well?" he asked. "Yes, thank you. Everyone has been very kind." "Good. Clifton Hill is a decent town mostly. People look out for each other." He paused, his gaze traveling over her face in a way that felt like he was trying to read something written there, though it can be lonely for newcomers. "I am managing," Adelaide said, busying herself with starting the stove. "I am sure you are. Martha says you are a hard worker." Another pause. "It must be difficult, being so young and already widowed." Adelaide's hand stilled. "It is not something I wish to discuss, Mr. Rivers." "Jackson," he corrected, "and I apologize, I did not mean to pry." But his tone suggested he had meant exactly that. From then on, Adelaide was painfully conscious of Jackson's presence whenever he was near. He did not ask more questions about her past, but she often felt his eyes on her, observing, considering. It made her check her story in her mind, ensuring she had all the details straight. Where had her fictional husband worked? How had they met? What was his name? She had decided on Michael, a clerk in St. Louis. They had been married 2 years. No children, which was both a blessing and a sorrow. The lie grew more elaborate each time she thought about it, and she hated herself a little more with each addition. One afternoon, in late September, Adelaide was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard raised voices from the barn. She tried not to listen, but sound carried in the clear autumn air. "I am telling you, the fence on the north pasture needs replacing," Jackson's voice rang out. "We have already lost 2 steers because they wandered through the gap." "And I am telling you we do not have the money for new fencing right now," Robert replied, frustration evident in his tone. "We spent everything on the new breeding stock. Then we are going to lose more cattle. That fence is not going to hold through winter." Adelaide heard Robert sigh heavily. "I know, son, I know, but we have to make do until spring." The argument continued, but Adelaide focused on her work, pinning sheets to the line. She understood financial strain all too well. Her father's gambling had destroyed their family's modest savings, and the debt collectors had circled like vultures after his death from a heart seizure. That was when the men had started coming around, suggesting that Adelaide could work off the debt in ways that made her skin crawl. She had packed what she could carry and fled in the night. "You have been standing there holding that pillowcase for 2 minutes." Adelaide jumped, nearly dropping the laundry. Jackson stood a few feet away, hat in hand, an amused expression on his face. "I was thinking," she said, annoyed at being caught unaware. "I could see that. You looked 1,000 miles away." He stepped closer, reaching up to adjust a sheet on the line that was slipping. "Everything all right? Fine, thank you. You always this prickly, or is it just with me?" Adelaide felt her cheeks flush. "I am not prickly, I am simply doing my work. You are definitely prickly." But he was almost grinning now, which softened the harsh angles of his face. "Look, if I have done something to offend you, I apologize. I know I can be too direct sometimes." Adelaide considered him, this man who seemed to see more than she wanted him to. "You have not offended me, Mr. Rivers." Jackson, she conceded. "I am simply not used to being around many people yet. I am still adjusting." His expression grew gentler. "I understand. Grief is a strange thing. It makes the world feel different." He placed his hat back on his head. "But you do not have to carry it alone, you know. People here are willing to help if you let them." Before Adelaide could respond, he walked away toward the barn, leaving her standing among the billowing sheets with her heart beating too fast and her carefully constructed walls feeling suddenly fragile. October arrived with crisp mornings and the smell of wood smoke drifting through town. Adelaide had been in Clifton Hill for 2 months, and the routine had become comfortable. She knew the morning preferences of each Fletcher man, could navigate Martha's kitchen with her eyes closed, and had even made a tentative friend in Olivia Crane, the schoolteacher from the boarding house. But the lie still weighed on her. It grew heavier one Sunday afternoon when Martha invited Adelaide to stay for Sunday dinner, an invitation extended to the handful of ranch hands as well. The dining room filled with laughter and conversation, and Adelaide found herself seated across from Jackson, who had clearly just bathed and shaved. He looked different without the layer of dust and sweat from working, younger somehow, though the intelligence in his eyes remained sharp. "Mrs. Thompson," one of the ranch hands, a cheerful man named Tom, said. "Where did you say you were from originally?" "St. Louis," Adelaide replied, the lie rolling off her tongue with practiced ease. "City girl, then. Must be quite a change being out here." "It is different, yes. But I am finding I prefer the quieter life." "Did your husband work in the city?" another hand asked. Adelaide nodded. "He was a clerk in a shipping office." She had her story ready, each detail memorized. "We lived in a small apartment near the river." "Must have been difficult when he fell ill," Tom said sympathetically. "The fever came on fast," Adelaide said quietly, staring at her plate. "There was not much the doctors could do." She felt more than saw Jackson's gaze on her, and when she glanced up, he was watching her with that same considering expression he often wore. It made her want to squirm. "Did you sell your wedding ring to pay for the funeral expenses?" Jackson asked suddenly, his tone casual but his eyes intent. The table went quiet. Adelaide's heart stopped. "I beg your pardon," she managed. Jackson gestured toward her hands, which were clasped in her lap. I noticed you do not wear a wedding ring. I assumed you must have sold it, times being hard and all." Adelaide felt the blood drain from her face. She had not thought about a ring. How had she not thought about a ring? Every widow would have a ring, would wear it or at least keep it as a treasured memento. She started, her mind racing. "I did not, that is." Martha came to her rescue. "Jackson Rivers, that is an incredibly rude question. A woman's jewelry is her own business." "I apologize," Jackson said, but his eyes never left Adelaide's face. "I meant no offense. I was simply curious." Adelaide forced herself to breathe steadily. "The ring was stolen," she said, hating how her voice shook slightly. "From our apartment before my husband died. We were burgled and they took what little jewelry I had." It was a terrible lie, hastily constructed, and she could see Jackson did not believe it. But he simply nodded and said, "That is terrible. I am sorry." The conversation moved on, but Adelaide could barely eat. Her hands trembled as she lifted her fork, and she excused herself as soon as it was polite to do so, claiming exhaustion. Martha offered to have Daniel drive her back to town in the wagon, and Adelaide accepted gratefully. That night, she lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling. Jackson knew, or at least he suspected. The way he had looked at her, the pointed question about the ring, he was testing her story, seeing how she would react. The question was, what would he do with his suspicions? The answer came 2 days later. Adelaide was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when Jackson walked in, closing the door behind him. They were alone. Martha had gone to town for supplies and the other men were out working the cattle. "We need to talk," Jackson said without preamble. Adelaide's stomach dropped. "About what?" "About the fact that you are not a widow." The world seemed to tilt. Adelaide gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Jackson pulled out a chair and sat down, his expression serious but not unkind. "You are not a widow, Adelaide. I do not know why you are pretending to be one, but I know you are lying." "You have no right to accuse me." "Your hands," he interrupted. "They are soft, no calluses where a ring would have been." "A woman who wore a wedding ring for 2 years and only recently lost it would have marks, a tan line, something. Your hands show nothing." Adelaide felt tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. "Perhaps I did not wear it often." "Then why the lie about it being stolen?" "And when I asked about your husband's illness, you looked at your plate the entire time." People remembering genuine grief look far away, not down. "You were constructing the story as you spoke. You are imagining things." Jackson shook his head. "I am not. And here is what concerns me. You are clearly running from something. The question is what? Or who?" Adelaide turned away from him, her chest tight. "Please leave." "Not until you tell me the truth. Are you in trouble? Is someone after you? Why do you care?" Adelaide demanded, spinning to face him. "What does it matter to you whether I am a widow or not? Because Martha cares about you, and she is family to me. Because I do not like seeing someone suffering and pretending they are fine, and because—" He stood, moving closer. "Because I have been watching you for weeks now. Adelaide Thompson, or whatever your real name is, and I can see you are terrified. You look over your shoulder constantly. You flinch when men raise their voices. You are running from something, and I want to help." "You cannot help me," Adelaide whispered. "No one can. Try me." Adelaide looked at him, this cowboy with storm cloud eyes who had seen through her deception, and something inside her broke. She was so tired of lying, so exhausted from carrying the weight of her false identity alone. "My father had debts," she said finally. "Gambling debts to very dangerous men. When he died, they came to me, said I could work off what he owed, but the work they meant—" She could not finish the sentence. "So I ran." I changed my last name, made up the story about being a widow because I knew a widow would be left alone, would be safe. I just wanted to be safe." Jackson's jaw tightened. "How much does he owe?" "Owed. My father is dead, but the debt was nearly $300. Jackson let out a low whistle. "That is substantial." "I know. I have been sending money when I can, small amounts to a man named Richard Malone in St. Louis. I am trying to pay it off slowly, but I am terrified they will find me before I can settle it." Adelaide wrapped her arms around herself. "So now you know. I am a liar and a fraud, and I have been deceiving everyone in this town. If you want to expose me, I cannot stop you. Is Adelaide your real name?" "Yes, Adelaide Thompson is real, just not the widow part." Jackson was quiet for a long moment, and Adelaide braced herself for judgment, for anger. Instead, he said, "Your secret is safe with me." Adelaide blinked. "What?" "I said your secret is safe. I will not tell anyone." He ran a hand through his hair. "But Adelaide, this Richard Malone and his associates, do they know you came to Missouri?" "I do not think so. I was very careful. I took a train to Chicago first, then doubled back on a different line. I used cash for everything. I did not tell anyone where I was going." "Good. That is good." Jackson paced the length of the kitchen. "Keep sending the money if it makes you feel better, but $300 is going to take you years to pay off at $20 a month." "I know," Adelaide said miserably, "but what choice do I have?" Jackson looked at her for a long moment, and Adelaide saw something shift in his expression, a decision being made. "Let me think on it. Maybe there is a way I can help." "Why would you help me? You barely know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Jackson said simply. "And because no woman should have to live in fear the way you have been." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it is worth, I think you are incredibly brave. It takes courage to start over the way you have." After he left, Adelaide sank into a chair, her legs too weak to hold her. Jackson knew the truth, but he was not going to expose her. More than that, he wanted to help. The relief was overwhelming, followed quickly by a new fear. She was now vulnerable to him in a way she had not been before. If he changed his mind, if he decided to use her secret against her, she would be ruined. But somehow, looking into his eyes, she did not think he would. The next few weeks were strange. Jackson did not treat Adelaide any differently in front of others, but when they were alone, there was a new ease between them. He asked questions about her real life in St. Louis, what her father had been like before the gambling consumed him, what Adelaide's childhood had been like, what dreams she had harbored before everything fell apart. In turn, Adelaide learned about him. His parents had died when he was young, his father in a ranch accident and his mother from pneumonia 6 months later. Robert Fletcher had been his father's younger brother, and he and Martha had taken Jackson in without hesitation. They had raised him alongside their own children, loved him as their own, and Jackson had spent his adult life working to repay that kindness by making the ranch successful. "I owe them everything," Jackson told Adelaide one afternoon as they sat on the porch shelling peas. "They could have sent me to an orphanage or apprenticed me out, but they kept me, made me family." "They are good people," Adelaide agreed. "Martha is one of the kindest women I have ever met." "She likes you," Jackson said, glancing at her. "She told me the other day that having you here has been a blessing. Said you work harder than anyone she has ever hired, and you never complain." Adelaide felt warmth spread through her chest. "I like her too. I like being here. Even though you have to pretend to be someone you are not." "I am not pretending about everything," Adelaide said quietly. "The grief I show for a husband I never had, that is fake, but the rest of me, the person I am here, that is real. More real than I have been able to be in a long time." Jackson reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. "Good. Hold on to that." The touch was fleeting, but it left Adelaide's skin tingling. She was becoming far too aware of Jackson Rivers, noticing things like the way his voice deepened when he was tired, the small scar on his left hand from a rope burn, the way he always made sure she had the comfortable chair when they sat together. It was dangerous, this awareness. She could not afford to care about him, not when her entire presence in Clifton Hill was built on a lie, but her heart seemed determined not to listen. In November, the ranch prepared for winter. There was endless work bringing the cattle closer to the ranch buildings, repairing structures, stockpiling feed and supplies. Adelaide helped Martha preserve vegetables and meat, filling the larder until it overflowed. The physical labor was exhausting, but Adelaide welcomed it. It left her too tired to worry quite so much. One evening, as Adelaide prepared to walk back to town, Jackson appeared with a horse already saddled. "It is getting dark earlier," he said, "and cold. Let me give you a ride. I do not mind walking. I know you do not. But I mind you walking alone in the dark. Come on." Adelaide allowed him to help her onto the horse, and then he swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. She tried not to notice how solid he felt behind her, how safe she felt enclosed in his arms. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the horse's hooves and the evening wind rustling through the last of the autumn leaves. Finally, Jackson said, "I have been thinking about your situation, your debt." "Jackson, I cannot ask you to. You are not asking. I am offering." He adjusted his grip on the reins, and Adelaide felt him take a breath. "I have some money saved, not a fortune, but enough. I could pay off your debt." Adelaide twisted to look at him in shock. "No, absolutely not. Why not? It would solve your problem." "Because I cannot accept that kind of money from you. It would not be right. And $300 is a fortune, Jackson. That is your future, your savings." "My future is the ranch," Jackson said, "and my savings will rebuild. But you, Adelaide, you are living in constant fear." "I can help end that fear. Why would I not? Because I cannot repay you. It would take me years, and you know it." Jackson was quiet for a moment. "Then do not repay me in money. Stay at the ranch. Keep working with Martha. Let me know that you are safe and happy. That would be payment enough." Adelaide felt tears sting her eyes. No one had ever offered her such pure kindness, expecting nothing in return. "I do not deserve your help." "Everyone deserves help when they need it," Jackson said firmly. "Let me do this, Adelaide, please." She wanted to refuse, wanted to insist she could handle it on her own. But the truth was, she could not. The debt would take her 3 years to pay off at her current rate, and that was if nothing went wrong, if she did not get sick or lose her job or get discovered. Jackson was offering her freedom, true freedom from the fear that haunted her nights. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Jackson's arms tightened around her slightly. "Because I care about you. Because somewhere along the way you stopped being just Martha's helper and became someone important to me. Because when I think about you being afraid, it makes me want to fix it." Adelaide's heart hammered in her chest. "Jackson, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know you are not ready for anything beyond friendship, but let me help you as a friend. Let me give you this peace of mind." Adelaide closed her eyes, feeling the steady warmth of him behind her. "If I accept, I will find a way to repay you, somehow, someday. Deal?" 2 days later, Jackson rode to the telegraph office and wired $300 to Richard Malone in St. Louis, along with a message that the debt of James Thompson was paid in full, and Adelaide Thompson was to be left alone. He returned with a receipt and a return telegram confirming the debt was settled. "It is done," he told Adelaide, pressing the papers into her hands. "You are free." Adelaide stared at the receipt, at the proof that her nightmare was finally over, and burst into tears. Jackson pulled her into his arms and held her while she sobbed, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring that she was safe now, that everything would be all right. "Thank you," Adelaide managed between sobs. "Thank you, thank you. You are welcome," Jackson said against her hair. "You are going to be all right now, Adelaide. I promise." For the first time in months, Adelaide believed it. Winter settled over Missouri with cold winds and occasional snow. Adelaide continued working at the ranch, but the weight of fear had lifted from her shoulders, and she found herself smiling more, laughing at Daniel's terrible jokes, joining in the household conversations instead of staying silent. Martha noticed the change. "You seem lighter," she commented one morning as they rolled out pie dough. "Happier," Adelaide nodded. "I feel like I am finally settling in, like this is really my home now." "Good. You belong here, dear. We are glad to have you." But Adelaide's growing happiness was complicated by her deepening feelings for Jackson. She found herself watching for him, her heart lifting when he walked into a room. She noticed everything about him: the way he was patient with the younger ranch hands, teaching them instead of just ordering them around. The way he always helped Martha with heavy lifting without being asked. The way he looked at Adelaide sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, with an expression that made her breath catch. The problem was her lie. Jackson knew the truth about the widow's story, but everyone else in Clifton Hill believed it. And a widow, even one whose mourning period was ending, would not be courting. Any obvious interest between them would be scandalous and raise questions Adelaide could not afford to answer. Jackson seemed to understand this without being told. He was careful to maintain propriety, never touching her when others could see, never looking at her with anything more than friendly warmth in public. But in private moments, when they were alone in the barn or the kitchen, the careful distance would slip, and Adelaide would see the heat in his eyes, the wanting. It was torture. One afternoon in early December, Adelaide was in the barn gathering eggs when Jackson found her. Snow was falling outside, gentle flakes that turned the world soft and white. "It is beautiful," Adelaide said, watching through the open barn door. "It is," Jackson agreed, but he was looking at her, not the snow. Adelaide turned to face him, her heart racing. They were alone, snow muffling any sound from outside, the moment feeling suspended in time. "Jackson," she said softly. He stepped closer. "Adelaide, this is complicated, I know. I am supposed to be mourning. I know that too." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "But Adelaide, I am tired of pretending I do not have feelings for you. I am tired of acting like you are just my aunt's helper." "What am I, then?" Adelaide whispered. "You are the woman I have been falling in love with for months now," Jackson said, his voice rough. "You are the person I think about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. You are brave and kind and so damn beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears. "I feel the same way. But Jackson, how can this work? Everyone thinks I am a widow. Even if my mourning period ended, there would be questions about rushing into a new relationship, and I cannot tell the truth without exposing everything." "Then we will be careful," Jackson said. "We will wait until it is respectable for you to be courted. Spring, maybe. By then, it will have been almost a year since your fictional husband died. People will understand. And until then," Jackson cupped her face in both hands. "Until then, we have moments like this. Stolen time when no one is watching. It is not ideal, but Adelaide, I will take whatever you can give me." Adelaide rose on her toes and kissed him, a soft press of lips that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more real. Jackson's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Adelaide felt like she was finally home. Here in this man's arms, she was not a liar or a fraud or a woman running from her past. She was just Adelaide, loved and wanted and safe. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Adelaide replied, the words feeling both wonderful and terrifying. They agreed to keep their relationship secret for now. In public, Jackson remained polite but distant. But in private, when they could steal moments alone, they existed in a world of their own making. Jackson would catch Adelaide's hand when no one was looking, pulling her into the tack room for kisses that left her dizzy. Adelaide would find excuses to bring Jackson coffee or lunch, using the delivery as an excuse to be near him. It was imperfect and frustrating, but it was theirs. Christmas came, and Martha insisted Adelaide join them for the holiday celebrations. The house filled with the smell of roasting turkey and fresh baked pies, and Adelaide helped cook a feast that covered every inch of the dining table. The Fletcher family had invited several ranch hands who had nowhere else to go, and the house rang with laughter and music. After dinner, Robert played fiddle while Daniel attempted to dance with Olivia Crane, who had also been invited. Adelaide watched from the doorway, smiling at the chaos when Jackson appeared beside her. "Dance with me," he said quietly. "Someone will see. I do not care. It is Christmas, and I want to dance with the woman I love." He pulled her into the cleared space that served as a makeshift dance floor, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. They moved together to the fiddle's cheerful tune, and Adelaide forgot to worry about propriety or questions. For these few minutes, she was just a woman dancing with the man she loved, and everything else fell away. As winter deepened into January of 1879, Adelaide and Jackson's relationship grew stronger despite the secrecy. They talked about everything: their childhoods, their fears, their dreams for the future. Jackson wanted to expand the ranch someday, build it into something even more successful that he could pass down to his children. Adelaide admitted she had always wanted a family of her own, a home filled with love instead of the tension and fear that had marked her childhood. "We could have that," Jackson said one night as they sat in the barn, hidden from the world by darkness and bales of hay. "A home, a family." "I want that with you, Adelaide." "I want it too," Adelaide admitted. "But Jackson, we have to tell people the truth eventually. I cannot marry you as a widow. The dates would not make sense and it would raise too many questions." Jackson was quiet for a moment. "What if we said you were never married? That you lied about being a widow because you were running from something and you thought it would keep you safe? People will be angry I deceived them. They might drive me out of town." "Not if I am standing beside you," Jackson said firmly. "Not if Martha and Robert support you. You are part of this community now, Adelaide. You have friends here, people who care about you. Yes, some folks might be upset, but I think most will understand once they know the full story." Adelaide wanted to believe him, but the fear of exposure still gripped her heart. "What if they do not? What if I lose everything I have built here?" "Then we will go somewhere else and start over," Jackson said. "Together. Adelaide, I am not letting you face anything alone anymore. Whatever happens, we face it together." His certainty gave her courage. "All right. After my supposed year of mourning is up, we will tell people the truth. But Jackson, you should know that once we do this, once we reveal everything, there is no going back." "Are you sure you want to tie yourself to someone with my kind of past?" Jackson kissed her thoroughly before answering. "Adelaide Thompson, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. You are my future, lies and all." February brought a cold snap that froze everything solid. The ranch work became brutal, breaking ice in troughs, ensuring the cattle had access to water and food. repairing structures damaged by the weight of snow and ice. Adelaide helped where she could, bringing hot coffee and food to the men working outside, assisting Martha with the endless laundry and cooking required to keep everyone warm and fed. One afternoon, a stranger rode into the ranch. He was well dressed for the weather, his coat expensive, his horse well bred. Adelaide was in the kitchen when she heard the commotion, and her blood ran cold when Martha came inside looking worried. "There is a man here asking for you," Martha said. "Says his name is Richard Malone." Adelaide felt the world tilt. No, it could not be. Jackson had paid the debt, had the receipt proving it. Why would Malone come here? She forced herself to stay calm. Did he say what he wanted, just that he needed to speak with you? Jackson is with him now, out by the barn. Adelaide grabbed her shawl and hurried outside, her heart pounding. She found Jackson standing beside a tall man with cold eyes and a thin smile. When Malone saw Adelaide, his smile widened. "Mrs. Thompson," he said. "Or should I say Miss Thompson, I have been looking for you." "The debt is paid," Adelaide said, hating how her voice shook. "I have the receipt." "Oh, the debt your father owed is settled, yes," Malone agreed. "But there is the matter of interest. You see, when you ran, you cost me time and money searching for you. I think that should be compensated, do not you? We had an agreement," Adelaide said. "The $300 settled everything. You had an agreement. I made no such promise." Malone's eyes were hard. "I think another $100 should cover my troubles." "That is extortion," Jackson said, his voice dangerous. "That is business," Malone replied. "And if Miss Thompson does not pay, well, I suppose I will have to share some interesting information with the good people of Clifton Hill. About how she has been lying to everyone, pretending to be a widow when she never had a husband at all. Small towns do not take kindly to liars, in my experience." Adelaide felt sick. This man was going to ruin everything unless she paid him, and she did not have $100. Even if she saved every penny, it would take months to accumulate that much. "How do we know you will keep your word if we pay?" Jackson demanded. "How do we know you will not just come back asking for more?" "You do not," Malone said cheerfully. "But what choice do you have?" Jackson's jaw clenched, and Adelaide saw him fighting the urge to hit Malone. She put a hand on his arm, a silent plea for restraint. Violence would only make things worse. "I need time to gather the money," Adelaide said. "You have 1 week," Malone replied. "I will be staying at the hotel in town. If I do not have my money by next Friday, I start talking." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Good day, Miss Thompson. Mr. Rivers." He rode off, leaving Adelaide and Jackson standing in the snow. Adelaide felt tears freezing on her cheeks, though she had not realized she was crying. "He is never going to stop," she whispered. "Even if we pay him, he will come back for more. Men like that always do." Jackson pulled her into his arms. "We will figure this out." "I will not let him destroy you, Adelaide." But Adelaide could not see a way out. If they paid, Malone would bleed them dry. If they did not pay, he would expose her lie, and she would lose everything: her reputation, her friends, possibly even Jackson if the community turned against her hard enough. That evening, Jackson called a family meeting. He asked Adelaide's permission first, and she agreed, knowing she needed help beyond what Jackson alone could provide. They gathered in the Fletcher parlor: Robert, Martha, Daniel, Jackson, and Adelaide. "We have a situation," Jackson began, and then he told them everything. About Adelaide's father's debts, about the men who had come after her, about the lie she had told to protect herself. About Malone's threats. When he finished, silence filled the room. Adelaide could not bear to look at any of them, certain she would see judgment and disappointment. Instead, Martha reached over and took her hand. "You poor dear," Martha said. "What you have been through, Why did you not tell us?" "Because I was ashamed," Adelaide said, tears flowing freely now. "I lied to all of you. You took me in, treated me like family, and I repaid you with deception." "You repaid us with hard work, loyalty, and friendship," Robert said firmly. "You did what you had to do to survive. There is no shame in that." "But the whole town thinks I am a widow," Adelaide protested. "When the truth comes out, then we will handle it," Martha interrupted. "Together. Adelaide, you are family now. We protect our family." Daniel, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Can we just pay this Malone fellow off?" "We could," Jackson said, "but he will just come back for more. Men like him always do. We need to find a way to make him go away permanently." Robert stroked his beard thoughtfully. "What if we threaten him right back? Tell him if he breathes a word about Adelaide, we will report him to the law for extortion." "He would just deny it," Jackson said. "And without proof, it is our word against his." They discussed options late into the night, but nothing seemed workable. Malone held all the cards, and he knew it. Finally, Adelaide said, "What if I just tell the truth myself? If I go to the community and confess before Malone can expose me, then he has no leverage. He cannot threaten me with information that is already public." "People will be angry," Martha warned. "You deceived them." "I know. But it is better than being blackmailed for the rest of my life." Adelaide looked at Jackson. "And if the community cannot forgive me, then maybe we do need to leave and start over somewhere else." Jackson took her hand. "If that is what you want to do, I am with you. Whatever happens." The decision made, Adelaide felt oddly calm. On Sunday, she would go to church, and after the service, she would tell her story. All of it. And whatever came next, she would face it with her head held high. Sunday arrived cold and clear. Adelaide dressed in her black mourning clothes one last time, feeling like she was putting on a costume. In a way, she was. This would be the last time she wore the disguise of widowhood. The small church was full, as it usually was. Adelaide sat with the Fletchers, Jackson a careful distance away to maintain propriety. The service seemed to stretch on forever, every hymn and prayer lasting an eternity. Finally, the pastor concluded his sermon and asked if anyone had announcements. Adelaide stood on shaking legs. "I have something I need to say," she said, her voice carrying through the quiet church. All eyes turned to her. She saw curiosity, concern, interest. In the back, she spotted Richard Malone, his expression gleeful. He thought he had won. "My name is Adelaide Thompson," she began. "And for the past 6 months, I have been lying to all of you. I am not a widow. I have never been married. I came to Clifton Hill using false grief as a shield because I was running from dangerous men in St. Louis who wanted to exploit me to pay my father's gambling debts." The church erupted in whispers. Adelaide forced herself to continue. "I know I deceived you, and I am sorry for that. I was scared and alone, and I thought pretending to be a widow was the only way I could be safe. I was wrong to lie, but I was not wrong about finding safety here. The Fletcher family took me in and has been nothing but kind. The people of this town have made me feel welcome. And I have tried to repay that kindness by being honest in every other aspect of my life, by working hard and being a good neighbor." She saw Malone start to smile, thinking she had just ruined herself. Adelaide looked directly at him. "There is a man here, Richard Malone, who has been trying to blackmail me with this information. He has threatened to expose me unless I pay him $100, even though the debt my father owed him has already been settled. I am telling you all this now so that he has no power over me anymore. I would rather face your judgment honestly than live in fear of his threats." Now people were turning to look at Malone, and the expressions were not friendly. Blackmail was a serious accusation, and no one liked a man who preyed on vulnerable women. "I understand if you cannot forgive me," Adelaide finished, her voice breaking. "I understand if you want me to leave Clifton Hill. But before I do, I want you to know that my time here has been the happiest of my life. You welcomed a stranger and made her part of your community, and I will be forever grateful for that, regardless of what happens next." She sat down, her entire body trembling. Jackson's hand found hers under the pew, squeezing tight. The pastor stood, his expression thoughtful. "Does Mr. Malone care to respond to these accusations?" Malone stood, his face red with anger. "The girl is lying. I came here to collect a legitimate debt." "A debt, she says, was already paid," the pastor said. "Do you have proof of this outstanding debt?" "I do not need to prove anything to you," Malone spat. "This is between me and her. Actually, when you attempt to extort one of our community members, it becomes our business," the pastor said mildly. "I suggest you leave Clifton Hill, Mr. Malone, immediately, and if you come back, we will be reporting you to the marshal." Several men stood, forming a wall between Malone and the rest of the congregation. The message was clear. He was not welcome here. Malone glared at Adelaide with pure hatred. "This is not over." "Yes, it is," Jackson said, standing as well. He was taller than Malone, broader and backed by every man in the church. "You have no power here. Leave now while you still can." Malone looked around at the hostile faces and apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. He stalked out of the church, and Adelaide heard a horse galloping away a moment later. The congregation turned back to Adelaide. She braced herself for anger, for demands that she leave. Instead, Mrs. Walsh from the boarding house stood. "I think we have all told lies to protect ourselves at one time or another," she said. "What matters is that Adelaide has been a good person since coming here. She has worked hard, treated everyone with respect, and contributed to our community. I, for one, forgive her deception and hope she stays." One by one, others stood to voice their agreement. Not everyone. Adelaide saw some faces that remained disapproving, but enough that she knew she would not be driven out, that she still had a place in Clifton Hill. Martha was crying openly, hugging Adelaide. "You are so brave," she whispered. "So brave." After church, people approached Adelaide with varying responses. Some offered forgiveness immediately, understanding the desperate circumstances that had driven her deception. Others were more reserved, saying they needed time to process what they had learned. A few were openly angry, telling Adelaide she should leave and take her lies with her. But the majority were kind. They seemed to understand that a woman alone, fleeing predatory men, had done what she needed to survive. And Adelaide's months of hard work and honest dealing had built enough goodwill that people were willing to look past the deception. As they walked back to the Fletcher ranch, Jackson kept close to Adelaide's side. "You did it," he said quietly. "You took away his power." "We did it," Adelaide corrected. "I could not have survived this without you, without all of you," she added, including the Fletchers. "So what now?" Daniel asked. "Are you going to stop wearing mourning clothes?" Adelaide laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "Yes. I think it is time to retire the widow disguise permanently." The next day, Adelaide wore a simple blue dress to work. It felt strange and wonderful, not hiding behind black fabric anymore. She was just Adelaide, no false identity, no constructed grief, just herself. Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting to reveal the promise of new growth. Adelaide continued working at the ranch, and the talk about her deception gradually faded as people found new things to gossip about. Some folks remained cool toward her, but most had accepted her back into the community fold. With the truth out, Jackson no longer had to hide his feelings. He started courting Adelaide properly, taking her to church socials and town dances, walking with her in the evenings when the weather allowed. People talked. Of course, it had only been a few months since Adelaide's fictional husband's death, but since everyone now knew that husband had never existed, the usual mourning periods did not apply. In April, on a warm evening with wildflowers blooming across the prairie, Jackson took Adelaide out to a spot overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I have been thinking," Jackson said, holding both of Adelaide's hands in his. "About the first day you came to the ranch, how scared you looked, how you tried so hard to be invisible, and then I think about who you are now, confident, happy, no longer looking over your shoulder every moment." "That is because of you," Adelaide said softly. "You saved me, Jackson." "In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Jackson corrected. "Adelaide, you taught me what real courage looks like. You showed me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for help, admit we cannot do everything alone. You made me believe in love, real love, the kind that makes you want to be better." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Adelaide's hands flew to her mouth, tears already flowing. "Adelaide Thompson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "The real kind this time, with a real ring and real vows." "Yes," Adelaide sobbed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Jackson slid the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the fading light. It was perfect. Adelaide had never worn a wedding ring before, had never expected to, but now one graced her hand. A symbol of real love rather than false protection. Jackson stood and kissed her as the sun finished setting, and Adelaide felt like her life was finally beginning for real. They were married in June, in the same church where Adelaide had confessed her deception. Martha helped Adelaide make a simple white dress, and Olivia Crane stood as Adelaide's bridesmaid. Daniel served as Jackson's best man, and Robert Fletcher walked Adelaide down the aisle with Martha crying happy tears in the front pew. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. When the pastor asked if anyone objected to the marriage, there was only supportive silence. Jackson's vows made Adelaide cry, promises of love and protection and partnership. Her own vows were equally heartfelt, thanking Jackson for seeing her when she had been trying so hard to be invisible, for loving her despite her past, for giving her a future. When they were pronounced husband and wife and Jackson kissed her, the small church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the Fletcher Ranch, with food contributed by the entire community. People danced and laughed and toasted the happy couple, and Adelaide felt like she was floating. This was real. She was married, loved, safe. Everything she had feared she would never have was suddenly hers. Late in the evening, as the party wound down, Adelaide and Jackson slipped away to the house Robert had built for them on the ranch property. It was small but sturdy, 2 rooms that would expand as their family grew. Jackson carried Adelaide over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition, and then they were alone, truly alone, for the first time as husband and wife. "I love you," Jackson whispered, cradling Adelaide's face in his hands. "My wife." "I love you too," Adelaide replied. "My husband." They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other in the intimate way only married couples could. Afterward, lying in Jackson's arms in their own bed in their own home, Adelaide felt peace settle over her completely. The nightmares that had haunted her since fleeing St. Louis had finally stopped. She was home. The months that followed were the happiest Adelaide had ever known. She continued helping Martha at the main house, but also began making the small house she shared with Jackson into a true home. She planted a garden, made curtains for the windows, cooked meals in her own kitchen. Jackson worked the ranch during the day but always came home to her in the evenings, and they would sit on their small porch watching the sunset, talking about their day, making plans for the future. In October, Adelaide realized her monthly courses had not come. At first, she thought it was stress or perhaps a change in her body from all the physical work. But when another month passed with no sign, she went to see Dr. Matthews in town. The doctor confirmed what Adelaide had begun to suspect. She was pregnant. Due to arrive sometime in late May or early June, Adelaide walked home in a daze, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach. A baby. She was going to have a baby with Jackson, create the family she had always dreamed of. The joy was overwhelming. Jackson knew something was different the moment he saw her face. "What is it? What happened?" "I am pregnant," Adelaide blurted out. "We are going to have a baby." The expression on Jackson's face went from shock to wonder to pure joy in the space of a heartbeat. He swept Adelaide into his arms, spinning her around before carefully setting her back on her feet. "A baby! We are going to have a baby." "You are happy?" Adelaide asked, though his reaction made the question unnecessary. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Jackson said, kissing her soundly. "Adelaide, you have given me everything. A partner, a home, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Adelaide continued working, though Martha and Jackson both fussed over her, constantly trying to make her rest more. As her belly grew, Adelaide would catch Jackson staring at her with such tender amazement that it made her want to cry happy tears. The baby arrived on a warm evening in late May 1880. The labor was long and difficult, but Adelaide had Martha by her side coaching her through, and when she finally held her daughter in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. "She is perfect," Jackson whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held his daughter for the first time. "She looks just like you." They named her Emma Rose Rivers. She had Adelaide's red gold hair and Jackson's gray eyes, and she was the most beautiful thing either of them had ever seen. The years that followed were full and rich. Emma grew into a bright, curious toddler who loved following her father around the ranch. When she was 2, Adelaide gave birth to a son they named Henry James Rivers, and 2 years after that, another daughter, Clara Mee. The small house became crowded, so Jackson expanded it, adding rooms until it was a proper family home. Adelaide never forgot the fear and desperation that had driven her to Clifton Hill, wearing widow's weeds and lies. But she also never forgot the kindness that had greeted her, the forgiveness she had been offered when the truth came out, the love that had saved her. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, and she and Jackson sat on their porch watching the stars, Adelaide would look at the ring on her finger, the real ring, earned through real love, and marvel at how far she had come. From a frightened woman pretending to be someone she was not, to a wife and mother surrounded by love and security. "What are you thinking about?" Jackson would ask, always attuned to her moods. "About how you asked why my hand never wore a ring," Adelaide would reply. "About how that question changed everything." "Best question I ever asked," Jackson would say, pulling her close, and Adelaide would agree, resting her head on his shoulder, home in every sense of the word. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and growth. The ranch prospered under Jackson's management, expanding until the Fletchers and Rivers families became one of the most respected operations in the county. Emma grew into a young woman with her mother's kind heart and her father's determined spirit. Henry showed a natural talent for working with horses, gentling even the wildest broncs with patience and understanding. Clara was the firecracker of the family, bold and adventurous, always pushing boundaries. Adelaide's relationship with the community deepened over time. The initial scandal of her deception became a distant memory. replaced by years of steady friendship and neighborly kindness. She helped deliver babies, nursed the sick during influenza outbreaks, organized church socials, and became known as someone people could turn to in times of trouble. Her own experience with desperation and fear made her particularly sympathetic to others facing hardship. When Emma turned 16, she shyly confessed to having feelings for the new schoolteacher, a young man named Thomas Preston who had moved from Springfield. Adelaide watched her daughter navigate first love with all its joy and uncertainty, offering advice when asked, but mostly just listening, remembering her own journey to finding Jackson. "How did you know father was the one?" Emma asked one afternoon as they worked together in the garden. Adelaide considered the question carefully. "He saw me when I was trying desperately to be invisible. He asked the questions no one else thought to ask, and when he learned the truth about me, he did not judge or condemn. He just helped. Your father taught me that real love is not about perfection or pretty lies. It is about seeing someone fully, flaws and fears and all, and choosing them anyway." Emma smiled. "Thomas makes me feel like that, like I can be completely myself around him." "Then he might be worth keeping," Adelaide said, squeezing her daughter's hand. Emma and Thomas married 2 years later in 1898, and Adelaide cried through the entire ceremony, remembering her own wedding 20 years earlier. The circle of life, continuing forward. Robert Fletcher passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1899 at the age of 73. The entire community turned out for his funeral, testimony to the impact he had made during his life. Martha moved into the main house with Jackson and Adelaide after that, not wanting to live alone. She became a beloved grandmother to the Rivers children, spending her days teaching Clara to bake and telling stories about the old days. Jackson's hair went gray at the temples, lines deepened around his eyes, but to Adelaide, he was as handsome as the day he had asked why her hand never wore a ring. They grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year, tested by hardships and strengthened by joys. In 1902, Emma gave birth to a daughter of her own, making Adelaide and Jackson grandparents. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Adelaide thought about the terrified young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach in 1878, pretending to be something she was not. That woman could never have imagined this life, this abundance of love and family. "What would you tell her?" Jackson asked that night, seeming to sense the direction of Adelaide's thoughts. "If you could go back and talk to the woman you were when you first arrived," Adelaide thought about it. "I would tell her that asking for help is not weakness, that the people who matter will love you for who you really are, not who you pretend to be. That's sometimes the scariest thing. Being honest, being vulnerable, is also the thing that opens the door to everything you have ever wanted." She looked at her husband. "And I would tell her that she is going to meet a cowboy with gray eyes who will ask about a missing ring, and when he does, she should tell him the truth, because that moment of honesty will lead to more happiness than she ever dreamed possible." Jackson kissed her, soft and sweet, the kiss of a husband who knew his wife completely. "I would tell that cowboy he was about to meet the love of his life, that she would challenge him and frustrate him and make him want to be better every single day. That she would give him children and a home and a reason to thank God every night before sleep." They sat together on their porch, the same porch where Jackson had proposed all those years ago, and watched the stars come out over the ranch. In the distance, they could hear their son Henry calling the cattle, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. Clara was inside practicing piano, the notes drifting through the open windows. Emma and Thomas had taken their baby daughter home earlier, promising to return for Sunday dinner. "Do you ever regret it?" Adelaide asked quietly. "Taking a chance on a woman who lied to you, Never, Jackson said firmly. Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Adelaide Rivers. Lies and all. Adelaide smiled, twisting the ring on her finger, the ring that symbolized real promises made and kept. You are the best thing that happened to me too. You saved my life. We saved each other, Jackson corrected, just as he had on the day he proposed. That is what love does. As night fell over Clifton Hill, Missouri, Adelaide reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought her here. She had arrived wearing black, pretending to mourn a husband who never existed, terrified of the future and haunted by the past. She had thought herself clever, using the disguise of widowhood as protection against a world that felt threatening and cold. But it had been a question about a missing ring that changed everything. Such a simple question, yet it unraveled all her carefully constructed lies and forced her to face the truth. In doing so, it had given her freedom from fear, from deception, from the burden of being someone she was not. The greatest irony was that in pretending to have lost a husband, Adelaide had found one. In wearing the disguise of widow, she had discovered what being a wife truly meant. And in fleeing from her past, she had run straight into her future. Martha passed away peacefully in 1905, surrounded by family. She was buried next to Robert on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. At the funeral, Adelaide spoke about how Martha had given her a chance when she had no right to expect one, how she had offered kindness without judgment, how she had become the mother Adelaide had lost too young. She taught me that family is not just blood, Adelaide said to the gathered mourners. It is the people who see you struggling and reach out a hand, the people who forgive your mistakes and love you anyway. Martha Fletcher gave me that, and I will be grateful for the rest of my life. The years continued their steady march. Henry married a rancher's daughter from the next county over and took over managing the cattle operation, proving himself as capable as Jackson had been. Clara surprised everyone by deciding to become a teacher, attending normal school in Kansas City, and returning to teach at the Clifton Hill School. Emma's family grew to include 3 children, and she and Thomas built a home near the ranch so the grandchildren could be close. In 1910, Jackson and Adelaide celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. The celebration was small, just family, but it was filled with laughter and love. Their grandchildren ran wild through the house while Adelaide cooked dinner with Emma's help, and Jackson sat on the porch with the men, smoking and talking about cattle prices and weather patterns. That night, lying in bed with Jackson's arms around her, Adelaide said, 32 years. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like a lifetime, Jackson replied. Other days it feels like we just met. Remember when you first came to the ranch? You were so prickly, so determined not to let anyone close. I was terrified, Adelaide admitted. Of being discovered, of being hurt, of caring about anyone because I thought I would just lose them. I had no idea that letting someone close could be the best decision I ever made. I knew, Jackson said, his voice soft in the darkness. From the moment I saw you, something told me you were important. I did not understand it then, but I do now. You were meant to come here, Adelaide, to this town, to this ranch, to me. All of it happened exactly as it was supposed to. Adelaide nestled closer to him. Do you think Emma would have asked you about the ring if I had been wearing one that first day? Jackson laughed quietly. I would have found some other excuse to figure you out. You were a mystery I needed to solve. And now you are my home, my partner, my life. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. And I would do it all again, every moment, just to end up here with you. The autumn of 1911 brought unexpected challenges. A drought settled over Missouri, and the ranch struggled as water sources dried up and grass turned brown. Jackson worked long hours trying to keep the cattle alive, and Adelaide worried about him pushing himself too hard. He was 60 now, no longer the young man who could work from sunup to sundown without strain. "You need to rest," Adelaide told him one evening when he came home exhausted, covered in dust. "The cattle need water," Jackson replied, but he let her help him wash up and sat down to eat the dinner she had prepared. "The cattle need you alive and healthy," Adelaide countered. "Henry can handle more of the work. That is why he is here." Jackson smiled tiredly. "When did you get so bossy?" "About 33 years ago when I married you and committed to keeping you alive as long as possible." They weathered the drought together, the entire family working to save the ranch. When the rains finally came in late autumn, everyone celebrated, knowing they had survived another challenge through hard work and determination. As Christmas approached, Adelaide found herself thinking about that first Christmas in Clifton Hill, when she had still been wrapped in her widow's disguise, pretending to mourn a husband who never existed. She remembered how Jackson had asked her to dance despite the impropriety, how he had been the first crack in the walls she had built around herself. "You are thinking about the past again," Jackson observed, coming up behind her as she stood at the kitchen window watching snow fall. "How can you always tell? Because I know you, better than anyone." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What memory has you smiling like that? Our first Christmas, when you asked me to dance even though you knew people would talk. I would have asked you to do far more scandalous things if I thought you would have said yes," Jackson teased. Adelaide laughed and turned in his arms. "We have had a good life, Jackson Rivers." "The best," he agreed, "and it is not over yet. We have grandchildren to spoil and children to annoy with our old people wisdom. I plan on being a nuisance for at least another 20 years. "Only 20? Adelaide asked, raising an eyebrow. "Fine, 30. But after that, no promises." They spent Christmas surrounded by family, the house full of noise and laughter and the happy chaos that came with young children. Adelaide watched her grandchildren open presents and thought about legacy, about what she and Jackson had built together. It was not just the ranch, though that was significant. It was the family they had created, the values they had instilled, the love they had demonstrated every single day of their marriage. Years continued to pass in a gentle rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Adelaide's hair went silver, and Jackson's back developed an ache on cold mornings, but they faced aging together with the same partnership they had brought to everything else. They took walks every evening, weather permitted, hand in hand, talking or simply enjoying comfortable silence. They still sat on their porch watching sunsets, still found excuses to steal kisses when they thought no one was looking, still laughed at inside jokes that had been decades in the making. In 1915, Emma's oldest daughter got married, and Adelaide watched another generation begin their own journey of love and partnership. The circle continued, endless and beautiful. One evening in early spring of 1916, Jackson and Adelaide sat on their porch as they had countless times before. The sunset was spectacular, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Jackson held Adelaide's hand, his thumb rubbing over the ring he had placed there 38 years earlier. "I need to tell you something," Jackson said quietly. Adelaide looked at him, hearing something in his tone that made her heart squeeze. "What is it?" "I saw the doctor last week, while I was in town." He paused, and Adelaide waited, fear building. "He says my heart is not as strong as it used to be." "Nothing immediately dangerous, but I need to slow down, take it easier." "Then you will slow down," Adelaide said firmly, though her voice shook. "You will let Henry handle more of the ranch work and you will rest." "I plan to," Jackson assured her. "Because I am not ready to leave you yet, Adelaide Rivers. We still have too much living to do." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, blinking back tears. "We do. At least 30 more years, remember? At least," Jackson agreed. They sat together as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and Adelaide sent up a silent prayer for more time. More evenings like this one. More moments of quiet companionship with the man who had seen past her lies to the truth beneath, who had loved her not despite her flaws but because of them. Jackson did slow down, letting Henry take over more of the day-to-day ranch management. He spent his time working with the horses, which was less physically demanding, and helping Adelaide in the garden. They took afternoon naps together, went to town for socials and church, and focused on enjoying each day rather than worrying about how many they had left on their 40th wedding anniversary. In June of 1919, the entire family gathered for a celebration. All 3 children were there with their families. Grandchildren ranging from toddlers to young adults filled the house, and even great-grandchildren tottered around on unsteady legs. The house rang with laughter and conversation, and Adelaide stood in the center of it all, marveling at what she and Jackson had created. 40 years, Emma said, hugging her mother. "You and Father are an inspiration to all of us." "We just loved each other," Adelaide said simply. "Every single day we chose to love each other. That is the secret." That evening, after everyone had gone home, Jackson and Adelaide returned to their porch. It had become their sanctuary, this simple wooden porch overlooking the ranch. So many important moments had happened here: the proposal, countless conversations, quiet moments of comfort during hard times. 40 years, Jackson mused. "When I first saw you step off that stagecoach in your black dress and veil, I could not have imagined this. Any of this." "Neither could I," Adelaide admitted. "I thought I would work for a few years, pay off the debt, and then maybe move on to somewhere else, start over again. I never imagined finding home. But you did find it. We did." Jackson turned to face her. "Adelaide, you know I love you, right? That I have loved you from almost the very beginning." "Of course I know. You tell me every day." "Good, because that is my legacy. Not the ranch, not the cattle, not any of the material things. My legacy is that I loved you completely, honestly, for 40 years, and you loved me back. That is what I want to be remembered for." Adelaide felt tears slip down her cheeks. "That is exactly what you will be remembered for. By me, by our children, by everyone who has watched us together all these years." Jackson kissed her, sweet and gentle, the kiss of a husband who had loved his wife through youth and middle age and now into their golden years. "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago, for giving me a life beyond anything I deserved. Thank you for asking why my hand never wore a ring," Adelaide replied, "for caring enough to see past the lie to the truth beneath, for saving me." "We saved each other, remember?" Adelaide smiled through her tears. "Yes, we saved each other." They sat together as night fell, wrapped in blankets against the cool evening air, watching stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. In the distance, they could hear their family Henry calling to his sons, Clara's laughter, the faint cry of a baby being soothed by its mother. The sounds of life, of family, of home. Adelaide thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off a stagecoach 41 years earlier, armed with nothing but lies and hope. If she could tell that woman one thing, it would be this: honesty, even when it is terrifying, even when it means risking everything, is always worth it. Because the love you find when people know the real you is worth more than any safety found in deception. Jackson's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers interlacing with the ease of 4 decades of practice. Adelaide squeezed back, feeling the ring on her finger, the symbol of real love earned through truth and trust, and choosing each other every single day. "I love you," she whispered into the night. "I love you too," Jackson replied. "Always have, always will." And there, on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built together, Adelaide and Jackson sat in perfect contentment, knowing that whatever time they had left would be spent exactly like this together, honest and completely, perfectly in love. The years that followed continued to be full and rich. Jackson's heart condition remained stable as long as he followed the doctor's orders and avoided overexertion. Adelaide devoted herself to ensuring he took care of himself, though he grumbled good-naturedly about her fussing. They celebrated their 45th anniversary in 1924, surrounded by an even larger family. Emma had 5 grandchildren now, Henry had 4, and Clara had just given birth to her first child at age 42, a surprise blessing that delighted everyone. The family gathered at the ranch, and Adelaide looked around at the sea of faces, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and felt overwhelming gratitude. That night, lying in bed, Jackson said, "We did good, Adelaide. Look at what we built." "We did very good," she agreed, snuggling into his embrace. As the 1920s progressed, the world changed around them. Automobiles became common, electricity made its way to Clifton Hill, new fashions and ideas challenged old ways. But through it all, Jackson and Adelaide remained constant, their love a steady anchor in a changing world. In the summer of 1928, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The entire town turned out for the celebration, not just family. Adelaide wore a new dress in pale blue, and Jackson wore his best suit. They renewed their vows in the church where they had married, surrounded by everyone they loved. 50 years ago, I made promises to this woman, Jackson said, his voice strong despite his 77 years. Promises to love her, honor her, be faithful to her. It has been the easiest promise I ever kept. Adelaide, you are my heart. Every good thing in my life came from the day I had the courage to ask you why your hand never wore a ring. And I had the courage to tell you the truth, Adelaide added, holding his hands in hers. Jackson, you taught me that being loved for who I really am is infinitely better than being accepted for who I pretend to be. You gave me freedom and safety and a home. You gave me everything. They kissed, to the applause and cheers of their family and friends, and Adelaide felt like that young bride again, full of hope and love and joy. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and enough food to feed everyone twice over. Adelaide danced with Jackson, moving slowly to accommodate his age and health, and it felt exactly like that first Christmas when he had pulled her onto the makeshift dance floor despite the impropriety. "Still prickly," Jackson teased, echoing his words from decades ago. "Only with you," Adelaide replied with a smile. "Good. I would not have you any other way." As they moved together in the twilight, Adelaide looked around at all the faces watching them with love and admiration. This was their legacy, not just the children and grandchildren, but the example they had set of what real, lasting love looked like. Of choosing each other through hard times and good, through youth and age, through lies and truth. The woman who had pretended to be a widow to survive had instead learned to truly live. The cowboy who had asked about a missing ring had found the answer to every question that mattered in the woman who wore his ring now. And together, they had built something beautiful that would outlast them both, a family founded on truth, sustained by love and strengthened by the simple, profound act of choosing each other, every single day for 50 years. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Jackson and Adelaide returned to their porch one final time that evening. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the stars emerge. 50 years, Adelaide mused. It went so fast. The best things always do, Jackson replied. But Adelaide, if I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Well, maybe I would have asked you to marry me sooner. Adelaide laughed. We had to wait for propriety. Propriety is overrated, Jackson said with a grin. But I suppose it worked out exactly as it should have. They sat together until the night grew cool and Adelaide started to shiver. Jackson helped her up, and they walked inside together, his arm around her shoulders, her arm around his waist, supporting each other just as they had for half a century. That night, as they prepared for bed, Adelaide caught sight of their reflection in the mirror, two elderly people, silver-haired and lined with age, but still clearly, unmistakably in love. She thought about how far they had come from that day when Jackson had noticed her bare ring finger and dared to ask why, such a simple question, such profound consequences. "Thank you," Adelaide said softly, turning to face her husband. "For what?" Jackson asked, genuine curiosity in his eyes. "For seeing me, for asking the questions no one else thought to ask, for loving the real me instead of the person I was pretending to be." Jackson cupped her face in his weathered hands. "Adelaide Rivers, loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Thank you for letting me." They kissed, sweet and tender, and Adelaide knew in her bones that this was what happiness looked like, not perfection, not the absence of hardship, but two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other, day after day, year after year, until that choice became as natural as breathing. In the morning, they would wake up together in their home on the ranch, surrounded by the family they had built and the life they had created. There would be breakfast to make and grandchildren to spoil and ordinary moments that made up an extraordinary life. But tonight, they simply held each other as sleep came. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed: acceptance, love, truth, and home. And Adelaide's hand, which had once been bare of any ring because the marriage it supposedly represented had never existed, now wore the ring of a union that had lasted 50 years and would endure in memory and legacy long after both of them were gone. The pretend widow had found real love. The questioning cowboy had found his answer, and together they had found everything that mattered. That was the story Adelaide told their great-grandchildren when they asked how she and great-grandpa Jackson had met. She told them about the lie and the question, about fear transformed into courage, about truth setting her free. She told them that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is be honest about who we really are, even when it is terrifying. And every time she told it, she would twist the ring on her finger, the ring that had been missing when Jackson first asked about it, the ring that had started everything, and smile, remembering the cowboy with storm-cloud eyes who had seen past her disguise to the woman beneath and loved her anyway. That was the greatest gift of all.